Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're back again with Pandemic Projects. This is the third reel that John sent me. We did a video on the Pen 85 Seaboy. We did one on the South Bend 840. And this one is another beautiful South Bend. It's the Gladding South Bend 880. And if you didn't have a chance to watch the video on the 440, South Bend was an independent company early on. Then it merged with Gladding, which is out of New York. Gladding was the fishing line maker. Then they got into some trouble with some bankruptcies, and eventually Gladding downsized, sold off South Bend. South Bend is now an independent company, and Gladding continues to make cable and ropes, although it doesn't make fishing line that as far as I'm aware of. They're in upstate New York. So this is the 880. This is a big size reel. This is in beautiful condition. I'm not sure if it's ever been fished. My guess is it has not gone fishing. It's part of John's collection. John was kind enough to send it to me and asked me to just kind of get rid of the old grease and tune it up. And quite honestly, I did. The only problem was I didn't do a video, and I know John enjoys the videos, so this is kind of going to be a rework, but I will show you. We'll take this reel apart completely. We'll show you how it comes together, how it was manufactured, and what makes this a nice reel. First and foremost, the reel was made in Hong Kong, and interestingly enough, it says designed and engineered in the USA, made in Hong Kong. So that kind of dates the reel to the 70s. It was kind of like when stuff was starting to go offshore in the U.S. Manufacturers wanted to maintain that U.S. connection, so you started seeing that on some of the reels. Interestingly enough, Daiwa is one of those. Daiwa was making some reels for Sears and some other places under trade names, and they kind of had this engineered and designed in the U.S. In that case, manufactured in Japan or Korea. But at any rate, before we get tearing into this one, again, it's already been serviced. You'll see new grease in there and the like, but I do want to show you the process in case you have one of these. I want to show you how the reel comes together if it's one that you're interested in. So before I take anything off beyond the external parts, like this handle I'm removing, just a couple of things of note. I wear a glove, protect my hand from the greases. I use a parts tray, which is the bottom of a milk jug, and I take pictures along the way. The pictures supporting how these things came off, just in case you get stuck along the way. You can go back and reference it. Now, my pictures are videos, but you can use a cell phone, you can use a stationary camera, whatever you like that's a picture taker, and go capture the images at critical points. And I'll show you one of them that's in here, but critical points, so that you know how to put it back together again if you get stumped along the way. And that may, a lot of us just like to rely on our memory. That's okay too, but in our memory, understand that sometimes we put a project together like this and then we have to walk away for whatever reason, and we come back and we sort of forget where we were in the process. So I also would like to take this moment to thank the first responders and essential workers that are helping us with the pandemic. Without your help, we certainly would be in a lot worse shape than we are, and we're trying to do our part here by staying safe, maintaining our social distances, wearing our masks, doing the things that the authorities are asking us to do, so that we can all get through this, get through it sooner rather than later. Okay, let's pull that plate. And you'll see there's fresh grease in here. Again, I've serviced this reel, but again, I want to show you the makeup of the reel, how it goes together. And if you're deciding to get a reel like this, what the components are. So we have a big reel here. It's an 80 size. It's a surf reel. It's got a huge drive gear, main gear, and a relatively substantial pinion gear here. It's connected by a crosswind block, and this one's interesting because if you look at this crosswind block, there's no apparent connection here in terms of how that crosswind block is on the shaft. And if you can't figure out how it's on the shaft, you can't figure out how it comes apart. And the first thing you think of is that well, there must be a C-clip up here and below like the Mitchell 302, but there's not. And so I'll show you how this reel gets serviced. You also want to make sure as you take this apart that you disengage the anti-reverse dog. Flip it out of the way. It's not important on the way out, but it is important on the way in. All right, so let's do what we can do here. The spool comes off, and again, there's no indication this reel has ever gone fishing, but I'm sure there are folks out there that have this reel that have taken it fishing and don't know how to tune it up, and that's what we're showing them. All right, once that's off, you can remove the spool. The spool has a little shim washer on it. It has a click ratchet for the spool to let you know that you're in the drag mode coming out. Then I like to flip this all the way down to the bottom, and you can use a 12mm deep socket to get that off. And that comes off in a traditional counterclockwise rotation, just like that. Again, back into my parts tray, and then you can remove the spool. And notice the spool has a keyway on it that's going to hold that, lock that shaft to the spool. Okay, so next up then is, how do we get this out? Right, there's no apparent look-see, and the answer is you have to pull the pinion gear and shaft, which you're going to do anyway because you're going to service it. There is a U connection here, little clip that goes inside, not uncommon on a lot of reels. It rides in the groove in the pinion gear. Kind of pop it up, and you can pull it out. And this is what we're talking about. Always a good time to take a picture. And then you can pull the pinion gear. Now sometimes these have burrings on them. This one doesn't have a burring on it. This one has a bushing on it. So you can take that bushing off. And again, I've serviced it. There's fresh oil on there, but for the purpose of demonstrating, you want to clean that up. If you find that there's any tarnish or thing going with a little bit more, going with a steel wall, make sure that it's clean. Now, I've put fresh grease onto the pinion gear, but if this was old grease, go clear those channels out before re-greasing. You can do it with that. You can do it with a hard brush, like that. And then you can re-grease. And to re-grease, you can use a fishing reel grease. In this case, I'm going to use Penn Precision reel grease and a brush. And you can just kind of grease that up. And you can use either a thin coat of grease or a light coating of oil for that bushing. Put that bushing back on. You'll notice that there's a ridge here. Well, if you were paying attention along the line, that little ridge is going to fit the U-clip that pops through underneath. So make sure that that's on the downside. When you go to put it back, if you've removed it, make sure it's on the downside as you go to reinstall. Then you have a couple of shim washers up top there for the spool. And then the last part that you can do on this is you can grab the grease brush, put a little bit of grease on the outside of the bushing. We're just going to set that off to the side for a moment. So here's mystery solved then. You've taken the rotor off, you've taken the pinion gear off. Now you can lift up and pull out. That's the only way you can do this, because here's how it's attached. So it's attached by two Phillips head screws, and those Phillips head screws are face down in the reel body, so there's no way other than to do what we just did there. All right, that's out. Just for fun, we'll put the rest of it out. Here's your main gear. We've cleaned the body on the inside. From a maintenance standpoint, you want to grab the oil and get a drop of oil or two around that anti-reverse mechanism. Again, if we didn't do this before, you would take a paper towel or something, clean the shaft, make sure that you get a little bit of grease on the shaft. On the back end here, you can't see it, but there is a shim washer between the main gear and the body. It happened to stay on the gear this time. That goes on top of the hole, and you may find it there when you remove. Okay, and then we can put a little bit more of the grease onto that shaft for the main gear. We can reinstall the main gear with the anti-reverse dog in the off position. If you had it in the on position, you're going to try and match that to the back here, to the click ratchet, and you could get in trouble and not mesh it properly. So take it in the off position, grab that gear and insert that gear in there. I like to do it with the stud down. That helps me in terms of alignment. Now we've got our crosswind shaft. Do the same thing here. You want to clean it. Again, this has been cleaned before, but you want to clean it. Put a light coating of grease on both sides. And then reinstall by putting it up through the hole in the body. And then turning it around so that you can match it to the stud. And that's how you're going to seat this. Now, because we're working with this pinion gear that has to get reinstalled, I like to put the handle in at this point to hold the main gear in place. Just like that. And you can actually turn it to make sure that it's working, that you have it set on that stud. And we did, but there's nothing holding that stud in, so use your finger if you like. Okay, so we're set there. Now we can grab the pinion gear and the bushing that we had serviced, and we can slip it over the top. And we can seat that into the main gear, just like that. And you need to make sure that that slot that we were referencing before for that U-clip is below the body. And you can grab the clip and insert that. And this flat part of the clip faces out so that when the other body piece, the side plate cover, comes on this, it will hold it in place. So that's next. We're going to grab that side plate cover, put that back. Well, actually, I'm going to hold it there because when we go to put the rotor on, sometimes this rotor will come down. So I'm going to hold my thumb on the rotor for a moment, or the pinion gear. Now we're going to load the rotor. And if this keyway knocks off, remember, you got to get this between the fork, between that little stud that's there. We can grab our nut, put that on. That goes on in a clockwise direction. Flip the drive on the deep socket. And if you're working on a lot of reels, these deep sockets really do come into play because these ones with the fixed cups, that's the only way you can get to that nut. All right, then we have the click for the drag. And we have the little washer that goes on top of that. Now we can put the side plate on. And you notice I'm leaving the spool off because we're going to service the spool. Alright, I'm going to grab the 3 screws, which I took out of the case. They're all the same, so you don't have to worry which hole these screws go in. And they are Phillips head screws. Again, John has sent me a series of beautiful reels. Like some of the folks that watch this channel, they do love and appreciate the engineering and the technology behind the older reels. And I guess there's not that many folks that work on these old reels any longer. So it's always good to capture how this is done so that if you do wind up with one of these older reels, you'll know how to go in and do this. Which is kind of how I started the channel, to pass along what I know before I can't pass it along any further. But if you have a reel that you're interested in, if you have a reel that you've been working on, and there you go. If you have a reel that needs some servicing and you're stuck along the way, don't be afraid to shoot me a question in the comments. I'll be try to answer those questions for you. All right, we have a C-clip ring here that's holding in the drag stack. always advise, hold your hand on that and grab a lever like a screwdriver, or in this case I'm going to use a pick. You want to work that out. It's riding in a little, this is a particularly strong, there we go, particularly strong clip. You can see how thick that is. Then you want to grab the washers out of here, and you'll notice the stack, I took it out with that clip so that you can see. There's a wavy washer, which is the first one into the stack. Now, if that was dirty, you would clean that out, but again, I've already cleaned that. Then the next one in, then is a flat washer. Then these are hard washers. You don't need to do anything with hard washers. There's no dry grease required. Then your eared washer goes in the middle of the stack. Another hard washer up top, and the last of the metal washers. So the key here was just to show you what's inside this, but make sure that that internal cavity there is clean, and make sure your drag washers are clean, or it will impede the progress of that drag. All right, back to this. Put one side in. These are pretty hard. These, as you saw, to come out, the spring, there's a lot of tension on that. Seat one of the corners into the indentation in the spool. Kind of walk it around. If you don't have the hand strength, this kind of gets a little tricky, but in that case I had the hand strength for it. And then once we do that, then we just need to load that in, and work it around, grab the button. And I have to admit, the first time I saw this, I kind of thought it was almost like a Mitchell, where that button goes in and pushes down and releases. It doesn't. It's just a cosmetic kind of a thing. All right, we'll tighten this down, make sure that the drags are working. All right, we're good. And then I like to back that drag off to take the pressure off. So there you go. That's the South Bend 880. Kind of a condensed version. There wasn't any cleaning going on there because the first time around I got rid of all the old dried grease and the like, but I did want to record this one for John so that he can do it the next time. And for any of you that have this reel out there, now you know how to take it apart and service it, and maybe how to get around that one little tricky thing there with that crosswind block on the axle. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Again, if you're a first responder, thank you for all it is that you do. If you're working on a reel and you stumble on a problem, leave a note in the comments. I'll try and help you through those. If you have a reel that you need serviced or tuned up, and for whatever reason you don't want to do it yourself, then yes, I do repair reels by mail, and you can contact me by email on the business card that follows. And for the rest of you, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. You're what makes this channel successful, and please stay tuned as there's more to come. So thank you. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.